Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. Okay, so we're continuing our discussion about interpreting God's communication to us. And we've talked about how we interpret God's communication just like we interpret every other form of communication. We look for the things that He says to us in His Word. We look to the things that He gives us examples of in His Word. And we look to the things that God allows us to draw necessary inferences from. But the question that naturally arises is, what about when God is silent? What about when we can't actually open the Bible and look and see that God says something on a particular subject? Maybe God is just silent about what we're supposed to do in a certain situation. Okay? Well, that's a good question, and really there's two ways of thinking about this in the religious world today. One is that God's silence on a matter means that it really wasn't a big deal to Him, and so He didn't address it because it really doesn't matter, and we can just kind of go ahead and do whatever we want, even though God doesn't tell us to do that. Okay, so it's basically that God's silence is permissive of our action. But then the other view is that God's silence on a matter means that He didn't want us to do that particular action, and so He didn't tell us to. He didn't mention it. And He didn't even imply it or allow us to make a necessary inference about it. That would be that silence is prohibitive of our action. And I want to argue that, of course, from the Bible, and I'm going to do that actually in the next video. But even before we get there, I just want to look at this from a logical perspective. So let's just, in this video, just talk about whether God's silence is permissive or prohibitive from a logical perspective. Okay? In verbal communication, it is true that silence can be permissive of action. If I tell you something that's straightforward, but let's say I make a facial expression that allows you to imply that I'm meaning something more, then obviously, even though I'm silent about a particular action, I've implied it by my facial expressions. So if I tell you to go to the grocery store, by the donut shop, but when I say donut shop, I say by the donut shop and buy steak, milk, and eggs, well, I've obviously implied that I also want you to stop and buy a donut. Okay, that's fair to imply. But if I just said go to the grocery store, by the donut shop, and buy steak, milk, and eggs, and I'm straightforward, straight face, nothing else, well, you wouldn't have any authority from me to go buy donuts. Okay? It's the same way with God's Word, except for one major issue, and that is that God's Word is written. All right? It's not verbal. And the truth is that in written communication, no silence regarding an action can ever be taken as permissive. It always is prohibitive. There's just no way around that, because you don't have the authority for your actions. So for instance, if you got home and let's say you're a child, but you're able to go to the grocery store on your own and walk to the store and run some errands for your parents, and your parents write a note, and on this written note it says, go to the grocery store by the donut shop. Okay, they're just telling you which store it is. It's the one by the donut shop. Okay, buy steak, milk, and eggs. Now the question is, do you have any authority to go buy donuts? No, you don't, because there's nothing that can be implied from that written note that suggests that your parents want donuts, other than just them mentioning the donut shop. But that was only to provide you with a location, to tell you which store that they wanted you to go to. Maybe it's because they know that store is the only one that carries the particular brand of eggs, or the particular brand of steak that they like to buy. But there is no authority there, because it's just written communication, and the only way that you can know what your parents wanted in that situation is by the words that they chose to include in that list. So when they wrote steak, milk, and eggs, they didn't have to write, oh yeah, and by the way, don't buy donuts, don't buy cookies, don't go to the bakery, don't go to the golf course, don't go to fill in the blank. They didn't have to do any of that, because by just writing what they wanted, the steak, milk, and eggs, they automatically excluded everything else, okay, that they didn't want. And it's the same way with God. He doesn't have to go through and tell us every little thing that he doesn't want from us, because that would just, I mean, the Bible, you think the Bible's big now, the Bible would be so much bigger then. No, all he really has to do is show us by telling us and giving us examples and implying what he wants from us. And that's it. That's the extent of our authority. I hope that that's clear and helpful, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time.